Total Screen proudly presents their official podcast, On Screen, with your hosts, Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the On-Screen podcast. My name is Tyson.
This is William Rohrig.
And we are doing our second episode of this podcast where we combine the best of TV, film, and video games. Last week, we talked about E3. This week, we're primarily going to be talking about Loki, the first 3 episodes of Loki. But we have some other things to get to before that, some other segments. So let's kick things off with a little news. So, our first news story is that Cyberpunk 2077 is now back on the PlayStation Store. You can buy it again, and Microsoft is going to stop offering refunds. They had like a long delayed refund process. They're going to stop offering those next month. So Cyberpunk is back. If you have a last-gen console, it's still broken.
Yeah, that's what they said. It's still broken.
Sony taking it off the store, Microsoft offering refunds. We all kind of knew that was just like a PR thing to make it look like they care. Because if they really cared, it wouldn't be back.
We knew it would be back eventually because
when it was fixed. But the fact that it's back and it's still broken means that they don't really give a shit. It's just it was PR.
Well, it's just one of the 2 things. You say like it means they don't give a shit. I think it means like they just decide they can't really fix it for PS4 and Xbox One. Yeah. I don't know.
But it's back on the PlayStation. It's back to be bought on PlayStation 4.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Apparently,
I would tell people looking into the game, get a next gen system and just wait for the next gen version of the game.
Or PC, and it works on Stadia.
Yeah, just get a PC.
It works on Stadia. It works pretty well on GeForce Now, I think.
Don't waste $60 on Stadia. But like that, I would say like the next gen version that's they're supposedly making. Who knows when that's coming out? Just wait for that. That's probably going to be the best running version of the game. Right now, like Tyson said, the PC version is the best running version of the game, and that's also the version that's up on Stadia, as well as GeForce Now. So that's what I if I was going to get the game now, that's the version I would go with.
If you want the game and you're stuck with a last gen console or like waiting for like the new version and you don't really have hopes on it, you just want to play the game or something, even though Will said like don't waste $60 on Stadia, it's you literally all you have to do is buy the game. Like you don't have to, you don't have to buy any hardware for it. You don't have to pay the subscription, the monthly rate. You can just pay $60 and play the game. And I'll tell you from my experience, I did play it that way just because I don't have any other way of playing it, and I was super excited for the game. So even before like all the last gen console issues surfaced, before people even knew about that, my only option was going to be Stadia, and I ended up doing it and it ran fine. Like it works great. Next to the specific PC build with like high-end PC parts, it's probably the best running version of the game besides that, You could also, get it besides Stadia on GeForce Now, and if you do it that way, it's in your Steam library. So you'd buy it through Steam, so then if you eventually get like a high-end computer, you could access it through your own device that way as well. So that's another like safe way to do it. But with GeForce Now, you have to either pay a subscription or you have to like wait in queues. to play, which could be, a pain in the ass. So every kind of way has its own ups and downs, but I beat the game a couple of months ago. It had most of its patches by then. There's still issues. There's still plenty of issues. There's also things like if you were expecting this game to be like a full-on GTA, but with like Cyberpunk stuff, the game's never going to be that, even if they fix it. Even if they get it completely fixed, it's never going to be that. This is an RPG. And if you're not into that experience, then it might be best just to give up on the game entirely, because it's just not what the game is, it's an RPG.
Right.
It looks like an open world game, but it's an RPG. The next piece of news we have is Final Fantasy IX is being adapted by a French edutainment company as a cartoon aimed at ages 8 through 12.
This is so weird to me.
Yeah.
It's weird not because, obviously Final Fantasy is a major world-renowned IP. People love it. But for me,
and Nine's a more obscure game in the series, so that's a weird thing too.
Yeah, it really is. That's the weird thing, because Nine, yeah, it is. Because Square never really talks about Nine. They've ported it over to other platforms, sure, but they never discuss it. When Square's discussing doing sequels or updates or reboots of Final Fantasy games, they'll mention Final Fantasy 6 comes up all the time.
Final Fantasy 7.
Final Fantasy 7 obviously gets a lot of love from them. 10.
Eight's pretty ignored too.
Yeah, 8 is.
8 and 9 are pretty ignored.
But 9 is 9 never comes up. And so when they announced that they were doing a cartoon about 9 specifically, I just thought, that's so odd.
And how about that it's from an edutainment company?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that it's geared towards ages 8 to 12. When we talked about before the show, when we were putting that show notes together, Will said it does have chibi graphics.
The character designs are probably the most kid-friendly of the franchise.
Which makes me think this French company just looked at pictures of the game and said, we'll do this. And have no experience with the story, because the story's pretty dark.
It's the only game to prominently feature chibi characters as the protagonists.
Outside of the 16-bit, and
outside the
ones.
8-bit ones, which weren't really supposed to be chibi. It's just the graphics.
That's just graphical limitation.
Yeah, it's there was no graphical limitation on the PlayStation. They literally just came from Final Fantasy VIII with fully realistic looking human characters to that. So it was very obviously in Final Fantasy IX's case very much a stylistic choice that Square decided to do once and then never again, because Square decided, no, Final Fantasy always has to be the most hyper-realistic game that we make.
As a big fan of the original Final Fantasy franchise, as I'll call it, which is 1 through 6, I always say 7 was that was the death wound. That was the deadly wound inflicted on the original franchise. And then 8 was okay, now the wound's festering and rotting. And 9 was the death rattle, that last breath of life.
9 was a great game.
That's what I mean. It was the last breath of the original franchise.
And also they very deliberately at the time said 9 was designed as a callback to classic Final Fantasy.
Yeah. Well, it's basically they were killing the original Final Fantasy franchise entirely at that point for this new Nomura-led franchise. And in doing that, they basically just threw a bone to the fans of the original series.
Yeah.
They're well, we don't need you anymore, so we're just going to throw you this one last adventure, and then peace out.
Peace out forever.
And then it's all going to be giant belt buckles and spiky hair from now on out.
Chaos!
Chaos! I guess we're pretty much done talking about the Final Fantasy IX cartoon. It's just so weird. And like we were saying, yes, it does have a chibi art style, but if you've played the game, it's one of the darker Final Fantasies as far as story goes.
Right.
It's darker than the original games. It's definitely darker than 10. 10 was pretty lighthearted, for the most part. It's so weird. And I almost didn't put it on our news list just because it depressed me. But then I said, you know what? It's such a weird story that it deserves being talked about a little bit. So yeah, Final Fantasy IX being butchered. Let's move on to our next segment. This next segment is called On Tap, and this is where we talk about the shows, movies, games that we're playing, things like that. what we've been watching, what we've been playing, what's on tap. So, let's kick things off. I went to the movies recently because I have a subscription to Regal, and as part of my subscription, when I signed up to their all access plan, like, you have to commit to like a year that you're going to stay with them for at least a year because, you know, businesses like to pull this kind of bullshit on you. And I did it because, hey, I have a Regal right by me, and so why wouldn't I? It's something I'm going to go to. Then the pandemic happened. Had not finished up my year yet, and what they did is they paused everyone's subscriptions. And about a couple months ago, I think around April, they basically said, okay, theaters are open again, but we're not going to we're not going to start your subscriptions right away. At any time you can go, and the second you go, it's going to kick your subscription back into play. And I didn't, because I wasn't vaccinated yet at that point. But this month I got a notice in my email saying, okay, yeah, time's up. We're straight up renewing everybody's subscriptions now. And I don't really have a say in the matter. I'm committed to it for a year, so there's nothing I could do. So basically, I'm vaccinated now, so I can go to the movies. And I kind of have no choice on whether or not I'm paying for this subscription, which for me is like, I think $23 a month, something like that for the pass. So I thought I need to go to a movie because it doesn't sit right on me that I'm going to be sitting on a subscription that I'm not using.
Right.
As you can imagine. And I checked the movies that are playing, and there really isn't a lot playing. The next movie that I really give a shit about seeing is Black Widow, and that's not until July. So I'm like, so what am I going to use to make June worthwhile? Like, what am I going to do? What am I going to watch to make it worth having a subscription?
What did you watch to make your subscription worthwhile?
So we ended up I went with my mom, who also has a subscription, and we went to see 12 Mighty Orphans, which I had never even heard of before.
I don't know what that is.
So it's a movie. It's got Luke Wilson in it. We're going to be talking about his brother later on in this podcast.
Oh man, the Wilson.
So yeah, it's got Luke Wilson in it, and it's based on a true story. It takes place in, I believe, 1938. And it's about a football team in Fort Worth, Texas. It's like high school football, but it's a team from an orphanage. And more than anything, it just kind of shows you how people treated orphans in the 30s, like how horribly they treated them, and just how like they just didn't think they were worth like anything. Like they were just considered almost like criminals just because of their circumstances, and how hard it was to kind of put together a team and to get them to where they could actually compete with other teams, and how they could get equipment and transportation and all that stuff. And then how it ended up becoming like an inspirational story for the nation, because I mean, this was around the time of, you know, the Great Depression had just kind of started to wrap up. You know, World War II is like kicking into gear around then too. So yeah, it's basically just a story about these orphans playing football in this time for, you know, a high school football team kind of thing. So it's a good movie. It's a fun watch if you like, you know, those kind of sad orphan movies, or if you're into like, you know, down on the luck sports stories kind of things, you know, the underdog sports stories. It's good for that. I probably wouldn't have watched it if it wasn't for the fact that I had to with the subscription, but that's kind of just where we're at. I had to get my money's worth on my subscription. So I still got to see another movie this month. Probably going to watch Cruella. I can't really think of anything else I really care about that's in theaters. I don't really care about that either, but I want to get some movies in, you know, I don't want to waste my money. But yeah, that was 12 Mighty Orphans. So if you're interested in that, check that out. Or, you know, if you can send us feedback if you had any similar experiences, or if you've gone back to the movies yet. I know for Will, it's probably going to be a while before he goes back to the movies because he doesn't have a real convenient movie theater situation where he is right now. But if you listening to this podcast have gone back to the movies, or if you're thinking about going back to the movies, send us feedback, you know. You can go to themightymE@gmail.com. That's my email address. Or you can contact either Will or I through Twitter. We'll mention all of that at the end of the podcast, but it's at Tyson Gifford for me, at Voxel Hero for Will. So, yeah, let us know if you've had a movie experience since the pandemic. Next up is Sweet Tooth. So I'm not going to go into too many details on this. I know Will hasn't watched this yet. This isn't our our very spoiler-specific segment of our show, so I'm not going to go into that. What I'll just say is it's a post-apocalyptic show that's full of hope, and that's what makes it like really fun to watch. It's absolutely gorgeous. I believe they filmed it in New Zealand, and you can tell. It just has that everything's green and bright and colorful and just stunning looking. The series is produced by Robert Downey Jr. and his wife. They're not in it, but they produce it. There's a few kind of actors that you'll see and recognize. Will Forte's in it in a pretty pivotal but small role. Yeah, it's a very good show. It was a very entertaining watch. It's post-apocalyptic, but it's not just dread and, it's not like The Walking Dead where you're just watching people that you come to care about and they're just all dying and being killed off. It's like it's hope. The story is a story about hope. So check that out, Sweet Tooth on Netflix. It's probably the best new show in a while on, besides another show we're going to talk about.
On a streaming service?
Yeah, on a streaming service. Yeah, it's,
okay.
The show we're going to talk about later in this podcast is also a very good show. But
I hope it's a very good show.
That's Sweet Tooth. Next up, Will, you've been playing a pretty hotly anticipated game on your PlayStation 5.
Oh, yes. I started playing Ratchet and Clank into Nexus today, and it's great. It's a wonderful game. I love it. Didn't get too far into it yet. I'm only like a couple hours in, but I'm already thinking about diving right back into it because it's one of those games where once you start, it's hard to put down. And also so far it's pretty breezy. It's not a bad way, it's smooth to go through. It's not going to cause you too much frustration to get through the game. It's not like a frustration type game.
It's not Ratchet and Souls.
Yeah, it's not Souls. So people looking for a good game to just get into that you could just play without to just chill and not get super frustrated. It seems like that's going to be a good game for that.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's the newest entry in the Ratchet and Clank series, which has been around since PS2. I played several of them in the past, and they're always fun games. And this is no different, really.
So this game many kind of see this game as maybe the first actual next gen game.
Yeah, it's designed for the ground up for the PS5. Unlike some other games that came out Horizon that's still coming out this year, or Miles Morales, or some other games that are on PS5 that are cross-gen. I don't think it's controversial to say, but the developers of Horizon, the new one, said they start development on the PS4. And Insomniac has said in interviews that Ratchet and Clank's development has always been on the PS5.
Yeah, but it's doing things too that are it's making use of all the it's checking all the next gen check boxes.
Well,
or current gen, I guess now.
One of the big things it's doing is it's using the PS5's SSD to eliminate load times. I played through a good chunk, and you really don't notice any load times between anything that's moving between areas or when enemies pop out. It's all seamless, which is pretty impressive.
How about, have you noticed, I think this might be one of the first PS5 games that you've gotten that's doing the full ray tracing.
Yes.
So have you been enjoying tracing, the ray tracing gaming revolution?
It's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. And now that I have a TV that I can take advantage of all the visuals, I've just been soaking it in. When I first started the game, I was thinking to myself how, this looks like a cutscene that would be, on the PS3, and you're actually controlling it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it's weird, it's the first time, I got that impression, as that, holy shit, this would be a cutscene on an older system, but it's you're controlling it.
Speaking of controls, I heard this is one of the games that really takes advantage of the new PS5 controller.
Yes.
So how's that working out? What is it doing? I know they did making different gun physics for I think one of the Call of Duty games was
so
make all the guns feel different. What does it do?
It's got the haptic feedback for the guns. So a lot of the guns have 2 firing modes, and it's got the triggers. And so on the PS5, it's got the sensitive, the adaptive triggers. And so how it works is it can sense how much you're pressing down on the trigger and do different things depending on how hard you're pressing down on it. So for example, a lot of the guns have 2 firing modes. The first mode's activated when you press the trigger down halfway, and then the second mode's activated when you press the trigger all the way in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got that going for it. Like, it's just really fun.
So that's Ratchet and Clank. You played something else.
I checked out the origin for Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin.
Was it Chaos?
It was Chaos. It's very much a Souls-like. It's very much wants to be Final Fantasy Souls. It's not as apparent in the trailer because the trailer really makes it look like more of a generic action game. But when you actually sit down and play it, you're like, yeah, this is trying to be Souls. Like, it has like
Final Fantasy Souls.
It has Soul-style combat. It has like... Actually, I'll get into it. The combat system is very convoluted. I don't even know what they're going for with that. But it has like the checkpoints, like Souls games, where like you go to a checkpoint and it refills your health and it refills your potions, which in this case, potions are the stand-in for like Estus in Dark Souls. Like instead of drinking Estus, you just take a potion. Final Fantasy potions, obviously. And it refills those, and it refills your magic when you do a checkpoint. And one of the things it does is, like, when you die, it decreases your maximum MP. So your maximum MP decreases every time you die, but you can get it back by, like, circle smashing, shield smashing, I guess. I forget what it's called, but, like, you break, like, an enemy's stamina, and then, like, you grab them and you turn them into a red crystal and you shatter them in, like, a shower of blood. And if you kill, like, enemies like that, then that, like, increases your maximum MP, so you can get it back. But, like, that's one thing where, like, yeah, the battle system's, like, a little weird because it's got so much going on. So, like, there are two bars. There's, like, enemies. You also have this, but, like, enemies have, like, a stamina bar and then their health bar. If you break their stamina bar, you stun them, and then you can do, like, a one-hit kill on them, which is you crystallize them and shatter them in a shower of blood. Or you can just kill enemies the regular way by depleting their health completely. Then there's your magic, there's your MP, so you have access to magic spells. There are different job types you can equip for your character that gives your character, like, different moves or different, like, magic spells, different specializations. And then there's, like, the parrying. So there's two blocking. You can do a regular block with your weapon, or you can do, like, a parry, which is, like, the circle. It's called, like, a shield smash.
It uses, like, a separate button, where, like, I think most games just end up using your same block button, but you just have to time it or something.
Yes.
So this is a separate button.
Yeah, this is a separate button. So you have your regular block, and then you have a separate button for doing, like, what they call, like, a shield smash, which is like a parry that you do by creating, like, a magic shield with your right hand. And you do have to time that for it to work, but it's like, yeah, it's a separate button. And it's fine. It's fine for the most part. Like, it's fun. There's another thing, too. You have your two party members, your two companions. Mm-hmm. And in the demo, they were really pointless. Like, they ran around and they fought enemies, too. They weren't that effective at killing enemies. And one thing is, like, when they die, you have to use up way your potions to, like, bring them back. Which, when you get to a boss, you don't want to be doing that. But they're just there running around doing stuff and, like, killing enemies. You can't equip jobs on them. You can't equip items on them. You can't.
Sounds like utter chaos.
You can't do anything. You really can't do anything with them except for, like, heal them. So kind of, like, made me ask you, like, why are these people here? You're just doing everything by yourself, basically, with these computer AIs tagging along. And it almost becomes like a liability at the boss, because sure, sometimes the boss will, like, change his focus on them and allow you to get some free hits on them. But most of the fight, the boss is usually laser focused on you, and they don't do jack shit to the boss. They hit him, but it's like barely does anything. And the boss fight is, for me, like, where the whole thing kind of broke down, because, like, the boss is, like, set up to where, like, if you run in and if you just do normal attacks, like, your sword, your giant freaking great sword that you spend all this time leveling up, hits him like a Nerf bat. And so what you want to do is you want to, like, use your magic to, like there's, like, a special mode where you could, like, go, like, overpowered or overdrive or something. And then you could do, like, these combos and stuff, which use up your magic meter. And what I found, like, I guess, like, what I found was effective is go into that mode, use up your magic meter, use your powerful attacks, and you do a pretty good dent in his stamina and his health, except that uses up your magic. And then the only way to refill your magic is to sit there and let him attack you and, like, try to parry his attacks, because every time you do a successful shield smash parry, it refills your MP. And then I was just like, oh, I guess I just got to keep doing this for like 15 minutes until my MP's full again. And then I could go berserk on him again. And I was thinking about it. I was like, that's really stupid. I hate that. Like, why do they design this like this?
It sounds like what you're saying is that there's a lot of systems in place and they make it kind of hard to keep up with. And if you could just kind of put an end to some of those systems, then you might have an enjoyable game. So if you could like kill the chaos.
Yeah, it's way too many systems. I think it's way too convoluted. And I know, like, they're probably going to integrate the other characters, like, your other party members more in the main game. And once they start doing that, that's going to be even more systems, even more stuff you have to think about, take care of. And I'm just like, that is way too much. One of the reasons Dark Souls works so well is because it's simple. Because, yeah, there's a lot you can do in Dark Souls. There's a lot of, like, weapons and spells and different ways you can approach, like, a battle. But the idea is, like, you pick your specialization and you go into the game with that. And you just play like that. And it's simple. There's not like a lot you have to think about once you've decided like what you're going to specialize in.
So for an action game where you have like multiple party members that are jumping in too, and based on the way you're describing it, it sounds like there's like no aggro system.
As far as I can tell, no.
That's just a weird choice.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, again, I can't rag on it because this is like an alpha demo. The game's still in an early state. Like, there was some technical hiccups too. Like, it was chugging at some points with the frame rate was dropping like really bad. But again, it's a really early game. So maybe a lot of the stuff will be smoothed out in the final game.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things they did is obviously they put out a survey for people who played the demo to give them suggestions.
I was just going to ask this. Is this one of those typical Square Enix demos where it comes with a survey?
Yes. Yeah. So they have asked for suggestions from the community. So who knows? A lot of this could be smoothed out, but I will say, despite the memes, there is an enjoyable game in here. They just need to trim the fat. They need to focus it more, and then they just need to work on the presentation a little bit.
So they need to kill the chaos.
They need to kill the chaos. But the story's probably going to be stupid through to like the final product. I don't think
certain things. It's not a bug. It's a feature.
Yeah, exactly.
You're kind of just stuck with it. Yeah. That brings us to an end of our on tap segment. Now we're going to go into full spoilers. So this segment, as the name implies, we're going to be talking about Loki, and we are not going to be holding back any spoilers. So if you have not watched the first 3 episodes of Loki, you might want to go elsewhere for right now. Cover your ears and go la 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 la, except this is the end of our podcast, so you might as well just stop it at that point. But yeah, full spoilers on Loki. So first off, Loki is brought to us by showrunner and creator Michael Waldron, who worked as a writer on Rick and Morty and is now one of the writers on Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now that they're redoing it with Sam Raimi instead of the original guy who was handling it before, they redid the script and so he's involved in it. So Loki, which is the show that's all about multiverses right now, is gonna probably maybe have the best tie-in of any of these Marvel series to like what's happening in the MCU, because the writer for the show is actually working on Multiverse of Madness, which seems to be one of the linchpin parts of the entire next phase of Marvel, this current phase. This entire season was directed by Kate Herron, who has done episodes of like Sex Education and Daybreak, and is doing, I think, like, I haven't even talked too much to Will about what you think about this show, but I think we can agree on, if nothing else, which I think we will agree, but if nothing else, we can agree it's pretty impeccably directed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's got a great presentation.
Fantastic presentation.
What do you think of this show kind of as a whole so far? We're only 3 episodes in, so things can change, but we're 3 episodes in. That's half the series. It's only 6 episodes.
It's half the season, yeah. It's solid. I really like it. Like I said, like, I gotta admit, like plot-wise, it's really being carried by the actors and their performances more than the plot. Because after like 3 episodes, like we're getting more stuff happening, but it really seems like it's still like I finished episode 3 and I'm still like thinking, okay, where is this going? Where are we going here? So hopefully we find that out really quick. But other than that, like the performances have been fantastic. Tom Hiddleston as Loki, obviously. Owen Wilson has been great.
Owen Wilson as Mobius and his chemistry with Loki is fantastic. I think in general, like, chemistry is a big part of this show. Like, the chemistry between a lot of the actors is really good.
Sophia Di Martino. Sorry, I had to look up her name. Her performance, especially in the 3rd episode where we get the most of her, was great. Loved her in the 3rd episode.
It's good. You got good chemistry between Loki and Mobius, between Loki and Sylvie.
Here's the thing I gathered, like, across like 3 episodes so far. It's like they're focusing more heavily on character interactions than like plot movement, it seems like.
That seems to be like a trend of the entire Marvel series. On Disney Plus.
Because like the first 2 episodes was like a lot of like Loki and Mobius going back and forth. And this episode,
the first episode was a clip show, basically.
Yeah, and then the 3rd episode was like we got a lot of back and forth between Loki and Sylvie. So a lot of character interactions, a lot of dialogue. But all along, there have been some interesting hints, some crumbs scattered around as to what's truly going on.
Any show that uses a theremin in its score is getting some top marks from me.
Getting some top marks from you. But I'm heavily enjoying it so far.
Yeah, definitely. Like, as I said, chemistry is a huge part of the show. Loki and Mobius, Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson have excellent chemistry in the 1st and 2nd episode. Loki and Sylvie, who's the Lady Loki character, have excellent chemistry in the 3rd episode. But then also, like, Mobius has great chemistry with Ravonna, who's the kind of judge character. In the brief moments you have between them, there's a lot of chemistry there, too.
She's like, I would say she's a judge character, but I don't know if that's particularly accurate. She's like the seems to be the highest ranking person in the TVA underneath the timekeepers themselves. She seems to be like the assistant manager to the whole thing.
I just wrote judge in the show notes as a way to quickly get us to know who we're talking about.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's based on the actress they have, which is Gugu Mbatha-Raw, who, I think will probably recognize this from San Junipero, the episode of Black Mirror.
Yes, that's right.
But she's in a lot of stuff. She's like a pretty big It actress right now. And I by that I mean, of course, not like the movie It, but I mean like she's a talked about actress, she's in demand. The fact that she's in this show tells me that there's going to be a lot more prominence to her character than what we've seen so far.
Oh, for sure.
It's like you don't just suddenly like show like a A-list actor who can get big movie roles and then go like, well, they're just going to be there for
that's just going to be a cameo.
Scenes. Yeah.
You're going to have that one scene and as the judge and that's it.
No. Yeah. And not even like a really big, like crazy cameo, which they do that kind of stuff, but not here, It's a great chemistry between her and Owen Wilson. And I think there's going to be more to come in there. Her character in the comic books is tied to Kang the Conqueror.
That's what I've read.
So that's interesting too.
A lot of people are like speculating that Kang is really like the one behind the TVA. There's theories that the timekeepers...
It's best not to be too caught up in the theories just because people that got too caught up in the WandaVision theories ended up a little upset.
Like I was going to say, like these shows so far, they haven't like really bent over backwards to create like convoluted twists. These shows have been pretty straightforward so far.
Yeah.
It's this... If you're thinking like there's going to be like a blind double twist, or you're thinking too much into it.
I'm hoping this one does more than the other two in that regards, because first off, this was the first of all of the Marvel Disney properties. This was the first one we ever heard about. Also, the writer of this show wrote Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which is going to be a big linchpin show of the next season. And then also, this one is legit multiverse, whereas like multiverse was hinted at in Far From Home and then turned out to be like a big joke. It was hinted at again in WandaVision and ended up not really being a part of the show. But here, like from the very first episode, it's just straight up, oh yeah, multiverse. Like you're in it. You're in the multiverse now. You know, you're seeing it.
Yes.
So I'm hoping this doesn't end in a very inconsequential way to the kind of the events and how they're going to pertain to the MCU. But the last two shows, even though I liked both of them, have kind of made me a little bit more skeptical about whether or not it is going to have a big tie-in to the MCU in the way that I would hope it would. But yeah, I mean, first episode played out mostly as like a clip show. You could say like, man, this show had cameos from all the Avengers, and but it's just literally footage from old movies, you know, where they actually showed like Loki learning information that he didn't have, and Loki had his whole Loki, this is your life kind of thing with Mobius kind of guiding him through his life story, even stuff that he hadn't yet experienced from his variant's perspective. But yeah. It's just, I think this show has gotten better with every episode. I think the first episode, I really liked the tone of it and stuff, but it really was like a clip show. I think the second episode started introducing some pretty cool concepts and did some cool things. But this third episode, man, like this is where you can really kind of see even just like the production values of this show, like how good they are in this episode where they're on a planet they're on like, what is it, a moon that a planet's about to crash into or something.
Yes, they're on an inhabited moon that the planet that the moon's revolving around is going to crash into and destroy. So this is one of the apocalypses that they ended up in after Sylvie broke into the TVA and tried to get to the golden elevator before Loki stopped her and inadvertently ended up there.
Yeah, with and I'll just say this in air quotes, with a supposedly broken time travel or like device to open up gateways. I actually do not think that is the case. No, I think Loki is conning her.
I think so too.
But it could also be the other way, that she's conning him, because we saw at the very beginning of this episode how she manipulates people. Yes, and how she can like interact with their minds. And in that way, she could literally be like, Loki could be like sitting on the ground with her hand to his head, like manipulating his mind right now for all.
Here's the thing about that. Why that's not the case. So in the beginning, we saw she manipulated the TVA guard to give her the information, right? And she very specifically did that by using a memory that she found in her mind and inserting herself into that memory. We found that that's a trick she uses. For that to be the case with Loki, Loki would have to have some memory of being on this moon in the year 2077. And
no, because she talked about the way her ability works and implied that was the easiest way to do it, because she has to she basically has to find a way to relate to the person.
No,
and that's the way she does it.
That's not what she does. She described that like for most people she could just do it. She could just touch them. For like people who are more resistant or more resilient, she has to resort to tricks like that. She has to resort to stuff like that.
Yeah, but she's a variant of Loki too, which means that they're closely bound, which means that she could have a more direct route to his memories.
I don't know. Are we 100% sure she's a Loki variant?
We might not be, but that's at least how she's presented so far.
That's how she's presented, yes.
There's a lot of what ifs. I mean, not to play reference to the upcoming What If series as well, which also has to do with multiverse, but there's a lot of what ifs.
And so I also want to bring it up because episode 3 is where she reveals that she calls herself Sylvie, and that name actually has significance to the Marvel universe. So we know in the Marvel comics there was a character called the Enchantress, who is a woman named Amora, and she has like mystical, magical abilities. She comes from Asgard. She's a very big Thor villain. She's always fighting against Thor. But in the comics in the 2000s, there was a second version of the Enchantress that was created when Asgard was destroyed and reformed itself in Oklahoma. Don't ask. There was this whole storyline in Thor where Asgard was reformed in Oklahoma and all the gods were reborn as people in Oklahoma. And this is where the second Enchantress comes from. Apparently, a girl in Oklahoma named Sylvie Lushton woke up one day with mystical powers similar to that of Loki's and took on the name of the Enchantress and even joined the Avengers. It was later revealed that Loki was the one who gave her her powers so that he could use her as a tool for his mischief. And it was even implied that she didn't even exist and that Loki created her from thin air. Completely.
So the thing about the MCU is that I think the MCU acts in the same way as like a completely new run of the comics.
Yes.
Like it'll find a basis from comic book storylines that it draws from, but it also isn't afraid to change things. I mean, in the comics, Peter Quill's father is not Ego.
Right.
It's a completely different character.
Yeah, they changed things. So here's the twist. Here's the MCU twist that they could go with. In the first episode, they showed Loki on Earth in the 70s. They showed that Loki was D.B. Cooper. And yeah, it was a funny scene, but it's like, it makes you think like that is...
It's a funny scene, but it's kind of also done like a throwaway scene.
It's done like a throwaway scene, and it's odd because, before this, we'd never seen Loki on Earth. We never knew that Loki was doing anything on Earth before the Avengers happened. And it's set so far back that it makes it like a very real possibility that Sylvie might actually be Loki's daughter.
Could be.
And if you think of the comics version being Sylvie Lushton was created by Loki out of whole cloth and imbued by powers with her, well, we could kind of interpret that if Loki has a daughter and if Sylvie's his daughter, Loki created her. Right?
There are many ways in which this could happen. She could also be the daughter of a different Loki variant.
She could also be the daughter of a different Loki. There's many different ways that could happen.
Yeah.
But I'm just kind of think that that's an interesting thing because when she said like her name was Sylvie, as very deliberately pointing to this version of the Enchantress. It's a very deliberate reference. The writers of Marvel don't do anything like that without deliberately. It might just be that she is a Loki variant and they're just winking towards this character for the people who know. But it also could be that this is the MCU's version of the Enchantress.
Remember, Marvel also brought in the Quicksilver actor from the X-Men universe.
Yes.
And then just made him, what was it, Bob?
Yeah, I know. But this isn't anywhere near as out there as making the Fox X-Men version of Quicksilver canon. That was like really out there to the point where like, are they really going to go through with that? No, they weren't.
Yeah, but they did bring the actor to play the same character.
They did. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah. The thing is like you don't really know where they're going, like how big of a deal they're going to go with this stuff, and how many actual loose ends they're going to leave open that will tie into other MCU projects, or if it's going to end up feeling rather standalone by the end.
And again, the name of the Enchantress, her thing seems to be enchanting people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't trust Marvel clues.
Oh, okay. I just want to bring it up as a possibility.
Oh yeah, it's totally a possibility. I just don't trust Marvel clues like as absolute.
It could be very much that this is another Loki variant. This is Lady Loki, who in the comics is a completely different thing. That's Loki literally in Amora's body, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Do you think the timekeepers are real? Not like in our reality real. Do you think the timekeepers are real within Loki's reality?
Here's the thing I'm going to go with. I think they were real. I don't think they're around anymore. I don't think they're running the show behind the scenes like people think. And I am actually thinking that the only person who knows this is probably Ravonna, and that she's probably trying to figure out what to do, and in the meantime trying to keep order within the TVA.
I think there might be a chance that the timekeepers as we know them were never real, and that what we're actually gonna get is a Wizard of Oz kind of situation. The man behind the curtain kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm definitely predicting a man behind the curtain when it comes to timekeepers. Like I said, there was a big bomb dropped in the third episode where Loki and Sylvie managed to put together through shared information that the people in the TVA are variants themselves from other time periods, from other timelines. And when Mobius had told, because Sylvie told Loki that, the guard that she enchanted, that she manipulated her memories, because she was explaining to Loki how her power worked. And she manipulated her memory of being on Earth. And Loki's like, wait, what? Because like Mobius had told Loki in the previous episode that they just came into being into the TVA. Like,
yeah, they had like basically like a religious philosophical discussion.
Yeah.
And it was about like, you know, comparing the gods of Asgard and with the idea of the timekeepers creating people out of the ether, and that the TVA were all people that were created by their, you know, their gods, which are the timekeeper.
Right, yeah. It's not like Mobius was lying to him. You can tell Mobius genuinely believed that.
Oh yeah, Mobius, former champion jet skier.
Yeah.
From a different reality.
From a different reality, apparently. Yeah, because he has a strange fascination with jet skis that he couldn't.
That has
quite
to pay
explain.
Off.
Yeah.
that has to pay off. There's got to be a scene with Mobius on a jet ski. It just has to.
Yeah, but once Sylvie tells Loki about like, you know, how her powers worked on that guard, Loki's like, wait, no, Mobius told us everybody in the TVA just poofed into existence in the TVA one day.
And she's like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, she's like, that's ridiculous. Like, yeah. So now we know like people in the TVA are actually variants who are working for the timekeepers.
Which brings up another possibility that I had considered before we even knew this information, which is that they talked about at one point that there are many Loki variants that they have dealt with. Not, you know, he just happens to be one of those figures that constantly gets in the way of the timeline.
Yes.
Through many, many, many variations, like more so than most other people, you know? And that makes me think that there's a pretty good chance that some of these other characters that we've met are actually Loki variants.
It's possible.
Mobius could be a Loki variant for all we know.
Yeah, Mobius, for all we know.
Although I like the idea that he was a champion jet ski, you know, in the 90s. In the 90s, he was a champion jet ski racer.
Yeah, I don't.
Wave Race 64 was based on him.
I don't think that's like all these people are Loki variants or whatever. I
don't think all of them, but I think that there's a chance that some people that we've met could actually be other Loki variants. And that could be interesting. Or characters that we'll meet that maybe we haven't met yet, you know, that don't think they are.
I'm not sure what the implications are of pulling these variants into the timekeepers pulling these variants into service for them and then brainwashing them to think that they've always like existed there.
What it really shows is that the timekeepers aren't as all powerful as they're portraying themselves to be, whether they exist or not. But like, let's just assume at this point that they are real and they're around right now, just for the sake of the discussion.
Well, it
shows that they're not as all powerful as they portray themselves.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because like when you think about it, like what Mobius said, like creating living beings out of like thin air, that's something a god can do, right? So the implication when Mobius said that, the implication was the timekeepers were gods. But then when Sylvie explains that they're variants, well, the implication is the timekeepers, if they're there, aren't really gods at all.
Yeah. And what about Miss Minutes?
Yeah, what about Miss Minutes? Exactly. And then there was another, like, this episode was full of bombshells, but another big bombshell was that Loki revealed to Sylvie that he is bisexual, which was a huge moment for the character because it's official now. Like
that seems like an obvious thing, you know.
It was an obvious thing, especially if you go by the character's history, if you go by Norse mythology.
Yeah,
even thousands of years.
I mean, Loki was gender fluid as a god in Norse mythology. He would be male or female whenever he wanted to.
Yes, we knew this, but it's important to hear Loki say it.
Yes,
right?
Definitely. Especially for the LGBTQ community who, you know, like this is kind of, there aren't really queer characters in the MCU.
No, there's no major.
I mean,
there's no major character like
the one guy in Endgame that's in the support group is probably the only one.
that was I don't like. Yeah, nice. But I remember because Kevin Feige like said like before like, oh, we got like a character in Endgame or something who's going to be like gay, and it's like, oh, people were like guessing, oh, is it going to be Captain Marvel? Is it going to be like who's it? And it was like a random guy in a support group in one scene who we never seen him before, never meet him again. It's like
it was one of the Russo brothers.
Yeah, it was one of the Russo brothers. Yeah, I mean, yeah, people were pissed, and rightfully so about that.
Yeah. So the acknowledgement of that makes sense. I think that Loki always made sense to either be like not even bisexual, but like pansexual and completely gender fluid, or just straight up asexual, like where he just has no interest in it, you know?
Yeah, but we get the point that he's not asexual because
yeah, that's clarified.
Like he does have interest in sex. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, or not interesting. I don't think it's necessarily interesting because I think it was pretty, like, it would have been weird if he wasn't, like, just by the basis of his character, not even just by Norse mythology, but just like the kind of character he is kind of fits the trope of like the pansexual mischief maker, you know?
Right.
That's like a common trope that you see in a lot of things. And like, it would be kind of disappointing if he wasn't like pansexual. Like, it would be kind of like, that's weird, you know? More so than it is interesting that he is revealed to be. So I don't know if it's necessarily interesting that he's there, but it's definitely going to be something that's big for the community, just because of how Marvel hasn't really done anything with that. I mean, they said that there's going to be some more characters that fall into that group, you know?
Right. Well, we'll just have to see what they do in the future, but for now, this was a big step.
Yeah, so that was a big deal. You could see that on Twitter.
Oh yeah. You could see
I hopped on Twitter after I watched the episode, and you could definitely see like a lot of celebration about that.
Yes,
which is cool.
Yeah. I want to acknowledge that because it was a big moment for the character and for the MCU.
Yeah, and for the community of LGBTQ fans of Marvel.
Absolutely.
Previously, like you'd had a lot of people in that community that were big fans of like properties like X-Men, for example, because I mean the entire story of X-Men could be seen in many ways. It's seen as a parallel to many different types of stories, like civil rights and stuff, but also
X-Men was very deliberately designed as commentary and allegory on discrimination. I mean,
yeah. Initially, a lot of the stories were parallels to the civil rights issues.
Yeah, it was basically the civil rights movement, but like,
and then in more modern books, it's kind of moved
the way the X-Men are.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the way the X-Men are set up is the theme is discrimination. So any group that faces discrimination can see themselves in the X-Men. That makes sense.
Yeah. So they haven't really done that with the bigger MCU, but now they've done it with Loki, and now they're going to start tying in mutants and those kind of storylines in, and it's a good sign that they've at least opened up with Loki first, you know?
Right.
That hopefully that means more representation in that way. I heard there might be some characters in Eternals that are LGBTQ.
Yeah, there are. That's why. Yeah.
So it'll be cool to see some more diversity there. Let's kind of go over some of the other actors that are in this that, you know, because I just wanted to say how it was fun to see certain actors. So first off, did you notice that the mean TVA agent, the one that hates Loki so much, did you notice who that was? That was Wunmi Mosaku, who played Ruby in Lovecraft Country.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And then you have Casey, who I'm jokingly referring to as the holder of the paperweights. The guy who Loki interacted with a few times, who works a desk job at the TVA.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, that's Pillboy. Pillboy from The Good Place.
Yeah, it's like, I have a terrible memory, but like, I recognize faces, but it's always like difficult for me like to place where I've seen them before.
Yeah. Miss Minutes, the talking clock avatar, is voiced by Tara Strong, who's a very popular voice actress who's been in a load of stuff, but maybe best noticeable is in Teen Titans and Teen Titans Go. She plays Raven. So if you recognize the voice, even though it's a different kind of voice she's playing here. Interestingly enough, the character of Sylvie is a relative unknown. She hasn't been in a lot outside of like England. She's been in a lot of like British TV, but even there, like very small roles. So this is kind of like the breakout role for this actress, which is really cool to see as well, just to see like a lesser known person get like a pretty meaty role, you know? Right. And so yeah, that's I think that's pretty much what I wanted to go through. Is there anything else you want to talk about with Loki before we take off?
I think that pretty much covers everything.
We're going to be discussing this week to week for the next 3 weeks, since that's how many episodes are left. We'll also be discussing other things like we did today. We're going to have other topics. On our last podcast, we would kind of just, cover one show, and that was kind of it. But we're going to kind of do a few different topics here and kind of try to spread things out across mediums for video games, movies, and TV. So next week, we're going to have some more Loki, and we're going to have some more other stuff that we just haven't quite figured out yet. But you'll know when the week comes. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of OnScreen. Yeah, chaos.
Chaos.
Thank you for listening to the OnScreen podcast, the official podcast of The Little Screen. Visit our website at thetittlescreen.com. This podcast can be found on any major podcast client, including Pocket Cast and Apple Podcast. The entire backlog of this podcast and other content can be found on our YouTube channel.